Welcome to this update for the Bitcoin price for March of 2025. Before I start, please remember to speak to a qualified financial advisor before making any investment decision. So, February was a very frightening month for Bitcoin investors. In particular, last week, the price dropped by about 20%. But then, only a couple of days ago, rebounded all the way back up again. And I'm sure a lot of people shit the bed over the last couple of weeks. Now, in my last video, I explained how I was using the 52-week moving average as a kind of initial stop loss before selling half. And interestingly, that actually did provide really good support here, where we rebounded off that level or a bit above that level, but rebounded very strongly off that level. So that does give me a bit of added confidence in using this as a good kind of safety boundary. However, of course, this is like a forward projection, but as the price changes, the forward projection will change as well. And so this darker red line, this denotes the new adapted continuation of this moving average. Again, as I've explained previously, my whole approach to how would I trade Bitcoin at the moment is one of a long-term investor, not a trader. So, like I said before, I definitely wouldn't be buying around now because the potential upside is probably only like a 2x or 3x, and yet we have massive risk. So, I definitely wouldn't be buying now. I tend to buy something once and then sell it years later. So my whole approach today is definitely not one for traders, just one assuming that you're a long-term investor and would have bought at a price something like 25,000, in which case you have the liberty of setting these fairly wide stop losses and you'd still be getting out at a 3x. In this video series, I'm looking at various parameters, particularly ETF purchases of Bitcoin, and looking to see if we do get like a 2x or a 3x in the price of Bitcoin this year. I go into a lot more detail in my earlier videos, but the general principle and kind of base case here is that Bitcoin has had these bubbles approximately every 4 years, and each time it's associated with a new demand of people coming in to buy Bitcoin. And this time it's mainly the ETF buying, which is this new demand of people bringing in US dollars to buy Bitcoin. And so that's why I'm keeping track on that and some other things like countries buying in order to try and time this bubble. It does make for some entertaining coverage. And it really is remarkable that if you go back and trace the price of Bitcoin, exactly every 16 quarters, it's achieved a new high. And it really is incredible that it did that twice in a row. And although it kind of seems incredulous that it would repeat that pattern again, that history would repeat itself 3 cycles in a row, that's certainly what a lot of people who invest in Bitcoin are focused around, and so makes a good base case for my analysis. So starting with the cycles, here I've superimposed the previous 3 cycles, who've got the previous 2 measured up against this cycle, and we see that we are still kind of on track, or what's happened so far this year, which would be the final 4 quarters of this repeating 16-quarter pattern. We are still actually in line with what people are expecting. And this 52-week moving average, which I'm using, which has been, which is actually, a fairly solid um, moving average and a very conservative moving average to use as like an initial stop loss. We're still above that, and as long as we're above that, I'll consider us still within the cycle repeating itself trend that everyone's got their hopes on. Here I've got the age of Bitcoins, how many of them are kind of liquid, i.e., they've only been contained within a wallet for less than a cycle, how many have been held for over a cycle, and how many long-term hodlers there are with Bitcoin that have been held for over 2 cycles. And here we see that, ETFs are coming in, have been a significant, have now taken up a significant proportion of the overall Bitcoin. And we have MicroStrategy, other companies and other countries here as well. And generally, it's very interesting actually. I'd expected a lot more of the liquid Bitcoin to be on exchanges, but actually only a small fraction is actually held on exchanges. There's a lot of kind of private retail, if you like, or retail that's where people aren't holding it on exchanges and who have held for less than a cycle. So it's still there's still actually a lot more than I first considered before making this graphic. There's actually a lot of kind of retail and a lot of kind of individuals anyway, or kind of people outside the system, if you like, who are still holding Bitcoin and presumably dreaming of Lambos. Now, when I compare with this resolution, when I compare this month with last month, there's actually no change. And as we go on in the months, I'll be looking for changes there to help support or disprove my thesis. If I dig down to a resolution of zero point 0.1 million Bitcoin, what we see is that the changes in February were that actually companies outside of MicroStrategy bought up zero point 0.2 million Bitcoin, and the people who handed them over to the people who sold, the people who shit the bed and sold these private companies Bitcoin were actually hodlers who had held for a cycle. So that's these guys here. There was a transfer from here to the orange here, which is the public companies. So there's a shift from hodlers that had held for a cycle to liquid BTC, and that's a shift from hodlers to public companies, but still not enough to show up on the resolution I'm using for this graphic. Now, here we have the Bitcoin price measured up against ETF flows, and we see again, particularly last week, confirmation of this trend where there does seem to be a correlation between the Bitcoin price and whether the ETFs are buying or selling Bitcoin. And there was a lot of outflows from the ETFs last week. Is this symptomatic of the price? It's just that overall there's more buying and selling, so the ETFs also buying or selling, or is it really the ETFs that are causing the price trend overall? And I'm not totally clear on that, but really there's certainly there's certainly a good argument. A lot of the price action is down to the ETFs, to the block website, and yet you can see here that the amount under management has dropped, and here we have the actual holdings of Bitcoin, which has also dropped. The block gives different data to treasuries.bitbo, so I'm kind of tracking both of them. Here we can see how, regardless of the block or treasuries.bitbo.io, the in February there was a drop in the amount of Bitcoin held by the ETFs. Countries stayed the same. Companies increased actually, and MicroStrategy also increased their position. So you've got there here a summary, and you see that the ETFs really are the majority. I mean, the countries have held these Bitcoin for many years without buying more. It really is that you can really see here how the ETFs do seem to be the major demand that's come in, and then public companies coming in as a close second. However, to one decimal place, we don't really see any change in the year as a whole. Only ETFs are up zero point 0.1 and public companies up zero point 0.1. And I've got here a chart where I've tracked that same data now for 2 months. And you can see in February, ETFs were down, public companies were up. One thing I'm tracking is MicroStrategy, and the question, are they able to keep on raising money, which is obviously a kind of bullish indicator. And we see that actually in February they raised more than in January. They raised 2 billion from more bond issuances and half a billion from equity raises, for a total of 2.5 billion raised in February. Here we have countries' holdings, and nothing happened apart from El Salvador bought 87 Bitcoin, but otherwise nothing going on here. It's unclear to me whether this cycle or this current bubble is going to be all about ETFs only and some, large companies, or if there'll be countries buying as part of this bubble, or whether it could possibly be the next bubble where countries buying comes into play. Either way, once you got to a point where countries are buying, I really question where will be the money coming in after that. But for future bubbles, and I do wonder if that really will be the top, or if countries don't end up buying. That to me, what after countries, what else is there in terms of new money flooding in to buy? That for me would be kind of like the last hurrah for Bitcoin, if where we truly do get to that greater fools moment, if we're not getting there already with the ETFs buying. So let's keep an eye on this. In terms of public companies, MicroStrategy did buy a load. It wasn't enough to move the needle to one decimal place. They're the only one with enough for me to even track on my little league table here I've got. But it's very noticeable in particular, that a lot of other public companies were buying. And in particular, Tesla acquired 16% more Bitcoin. Now, obviously, Elon Musk is very well connected to the US government at the moment. So this buying by Tesla in the last month has to be a green flag for Bitcoin. I mean, that really has to spur optimism here for Bitcoiners. Nothing going on with the private companies. And so now I'll do my kind of final roundup of the things I'm tracking. In terms of the cycle, we're still above the moving average that I'm using. And so I consider us still conforming to these kind of cycle trends. So whether you believe in the cycles or not, that's a green light. The ETF flows were actually negative, not negative enough to be like a red light for me. So they're on my scale here, it's a yellow light, and this is definitely a bit worrying. Yes, MicroStrategy is still able to raise money to buy Bitcoin, And then here I've got some kind of too good to be true indicators, but these are more for if the price does start going crazy. These are just some KPI I've developed just to help keep our feet on the ground if things do start getting a bit crazy. So 95% of people who invest in Bitcoin are doing so just because they want to make loads of money as a gamble, really, a speculation. And against this cycle's base case, it's kind of still intact. If you look at previous cycles, you can see that actually you'd have to wait still, till till really after the summer before you knew for sure whether we were going to be getting the moonshot or not. And so, really, it's a case of being patient. But from my perspective here, as a long term investor, not a short term trader, assuming that you'd acquired your Bitcoin a number of years ago and had you'd be looking at a 3x, at this moving average here. But the longer that the year goes on, without us penetrating all-time highs that we achieved earlier this year, the longer we go on without that happening, the more and more you kind of start to worry that the greater falls moment may have already passed. I do videos like this one just for fun as a hobby. It's for entertainment. Always consult a qualified financial advisor before making any investment decision.